You are in for a treat, my friend, because on this video, I'm joined by a very special guest, Yo Samdy Sam. Yes! Sam and I are going to chat about life as autistic parents and a little thing called EMDR. Let's go. Welcome, you beautiful person. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Orion Kelly, that autistic guy. I'm all about helping you raise your level of understanding, acceptance, and appreciation of the autistic community. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, it'd be great if you'd consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. You'll never miss the videos, and the best part is you join the best community on YouTube. I am super excited. Can't be any more excited than I am right now to chat to my very special guest, Yo Samdy Sam. Sam is an incredible autistic woman. She is an absolutely amazing autistic advocate and content creator with a YouTube audience of millions right across the planet. Yo Samdy Sam herself. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you for having me.
I really am, seriously super grateful to chat with you, and you have a great personality, a great channel, great content. I'll always love your quirky humor and who you are. So it's genuinely amazing to chat with you. So thank you so much. I genuinely appreciate it. We have something in common, which is we're both autistic parents.
Right. Yeah.
And I reckon that's a great thing to talk about. What do you think?
I think so. And, I get asked about doing more content on parenting quite often by my followers who I think, probably due to my age, I think my followers and my viewers tend to be older. I'm sure I have 20-year-olds watching me, but I don't have all the... But, I have a lot of later diagnosed people who have kids, people who only kind of discovered their own autism after maybe their kids were diagnosed or even after, finding videos online. And it's just one of those things where there's a big black hole of people talking about these experiences that they have. There's so much about being a parent to autistic kids because that's what the default is. That's the default struggle, right? Is autism is hard because it's so hard to be a parent to them, and it's like, well, what about us?
I didn't get diagnosed. Well, actually, let's say it like this: but for having my first son, I may not have ever been pushed over the edge to the point where going through the assessment with him, you're doing all the forms and going, my wife's kind of going, hey, that's you too. And I'm going, oh, this seems like me too. But also I felt like for the first time in my life, my capacities were outweighed by my stresses and demands placed upon me, which I know is capital C in the kind of DSM-5, and people almost overlook it. It's like a diagnostic thing where they talk about capacities. I found that, early on with our first child, it was that kind of running joke of, oh, don't worry, the first 6 weeks are the hardest. Don't worry, the first 6 months. Don't worry, the first year. Don't worry, the first... It was... It never got any easier. From your point of view, because I guess we're starting at the start here now. I'm right. We've got two kids. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think mine are younger than yours, though.
Yeah, 100% they are.
Yeah. First
child. You were diagnosed before your first child?
No. So my diagnosis came as a result of, like you say, this severely reduced capacity. Not because I was going through a process with him. He's not diagnosed. I suspect neurodivergent. But, I was, I think I was like 4 or 5 months in or something, and I was just like, why am I suddenly not able to do all these things that I could do before? Why do I feel like I've been run over by a truck, kind of mentally speaking? And as time went on, I think things did get easier for me. I found the baby, maybe it's like, being a mother versus a father. I found the really small baby phase just completely draining of everything. Babies are cute, but don't make me do it again, So for me, it was like, okay, so this, it knocked me out, I don't know, for 6 months, I would say. And the second time around, I think it was even longer. I was sitting on the TV, as you do, when you've got a baby, feeding them over and over and over again, and watching a lot of YouTube. The YouTube suggestions, the YouTube algorithms often know you more than you know yourself.
God bless them. God bless them.
So this video, yeah, exactly. I think actually a lot of people have had that as a result of my videos now. I had that experience with another video about autism in girls or autism in women. And, you know, I clicked on it because I was like, oh, fine, YouTube, I'll watch it then. And it's just as well it is, you know. You know, that was that. After that, I was like, you know, that was really a very much a sort of moment where not only did I recognize all these things that I was struggling with at the moment, the sensory aspects of having kids is pretty huge, but also looking back at my life and thinking, well, things were never really quite right, were they? So
yeah, exactly.
You know, I did a psychology degree. I learned about what autism looked like, and it doesn't look anything like it does in me. Even though when you know how to look for the traits, I tick all the boxes quite easily, as my psychologist said. So yeah, it was really just this moment, and then you know, comparing. I know you shouldn't compare yourself to other parents, but comparing myself to the other mums and thinking, well, why do they have it so easy? Why are they not struggling like I'm struggling? You know, how are they managing to be this functional? And just thinking, like, what's wrong with me? And also, what didn't help was that my son, he had a lot of problems sleeping as a young child. And I didn't know anything about sleep and ADHD and all this kind of stuff. And so I was basically very, very sleep deprived for a number of years. And it's only now that he does actually sleep, and he sleeps really well, and we have his bedtime routine that we do not deviate from, you know. And apparently my daughter actually quite likes to sleep. So that was after what happened with my daughter, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, you know, now she's sleeping. I'm like, oh, this is a little bit better. So, you know, the sleep deprivation really hit me. My brain does not function very well on not much sleep.
Yeah.
It's always something I was worried about when having kids, but I never thought like I would have a child that just wouldn't go to sleep. I guess that you never thought that you would have an autistic child, right? Because why would you?
Yeah, that's right. And I definitely want to talk about some of the different struggles with your daughter. And also, we've mentioned something that I know you talked about and I want to talk about too, which I have no idea about, EMDR, but we'll get to that a bit later. Our first gave us more grief than our second, in the respect that he had, not only was sleeping really bad, but it was like, if there was something to make his life worse, he had it. Horrible reflux in like everything. And then they were like, okay, you can't have cow's milk, or he has to have this, or he has to have that, or you get cut this out of the diet, cut that out of the diet. Even now, my wife and I still say, you know, I feel like it's been over 8 years and we have not got over being sleep deprived. It doesn't, it's been because knowing now our 8-year-old's autistic, the sleeping thing makes sense. And, you know, I was a grown man and I still struggle to go to sleep. And now I've found the perfect drug to go to sleep every night. It's called having kids. What about you? Did you find in your community, with your friends, with your family, did you find that they were saying, oh, what's the deal with your baby? Or, you know, like, were they supportive? Were they trying to help? Were they helpful?
Well, I think my second child, my daughter, there was a lot of, what's the deal with this baby? Sometimes, often there still is. So my son was, as a young kid, quite easygoing, apart from the fact that he didn't sleep very well. As a baby and even as a toddler, he was very chill. He was very helpful and obliging, and, you know, but I still felt like I had very different experiences to the other parents, to the other mums, and that's very alienating because my son is also hyperlexic. He was a very early reader, so he was identifying letters when he was 2 and pretty much starting with reading his first words when he was about 3, and he's now 5 and reading quite fluently. So that was a big difference, because every time I talked about this, because I just wanted to share what was going on with my son, because I wanted to feel a part of a conversation, and it was like I was boasting about him or something. I was either boasting about him or I was complaining because he didn't sleep, and it's like, oh, well, all kids struggle to sleep, you know, and it's like, no, they don't. Or so it's sort of like, it felt really like I couldn't share as much with other people because my experiences, not just my child, but also my experiences of parenting, were really different. And I struggled with things that people say, oh, well, that's just kids. And I'm like, yeah, but what I'm saying is I'm struggling with it. I think maybe my experience is different because me and my husband are British. We live in the Netherlands, so we don't have family here. So that was quite hard. When you have small kids, you really often just need somebody to like hold the baby while you go and cry in a corner or something.
Absolutely.
So that was really hard, and obviously my second came during, well, it wasn't during lockdown, but she was like a corona baby during this weird period where travel was sort of difficult, and so that was quite alienating. I didn't really have any mums groups or anything, but to be honest, mums group wouldn't have helped with my second child because she was the reflux baby. She was the screamer basically, and I guess that leads us on to talking about EMDR because we all had EMDR as a result of her screaming now. So it was like we had this first one, and I think my son was like 3. He was going through this cute phase. He was learning to read. He was yes mummy, no mummy, all of this stuff, and we were like, wow, we should really have another one. This is easy. Idiot.
I want to ask you exactly. I want to ask you about that. Fools. No, I thought that was really a really interesting question to ask because I like to just be real. And in my mind, the real factor is I had a kid here. It made us realise we're both autistic with the kid and me. Why on God's name would we put ourselves through this again, the no sleep, the hardness of it? I mean, did you and your husband, I know you told me that, you've actually heard people say, why would you dare want to try and bring another autistic person? Like, you could, why would you risk it, like the strangers? But did you and your husband have a conversation? Should we, or was it just something that it just went unsaid?
We always had this idea that we wanted 2 kids. I don't know. I don't know why. It felt like one kid was good, but it didn't quite feel like complete or something. I mean, there's a reason there's 4 years between them. It took me a while to even be ready to do that again. So,
we're 5. We've got 5 years between ours. Yeah, exactly.
We got to the stage where we were like, life just got easy for a while. Just a really small while. Life got easy, and we were like, now's probably seems like a good time to do this, right? I feel really bad. One day, my children are going to watch this on the internet and be like, "Mommy, how dare you?" But I'm trying to tell how it is, and I love my kids, and I'm really glad. I have now got to the point where I'm glad we had the second one.
I mean, my kids saved my life. I would actually say my kids saved my life by being how they were and causing me to look into me as a person and get assessed. Like, my kids saved my life, and I think these videos will be helpful for them in 20 or 30 years because it'll be like, oh, that explains our kids, sucked in.
Exactly.
You got what you deserve.
We'd be like, we recorded it all for you. We warned you.
Yeah, I told them, well, hello. I really want to hone in on. We had this conversation, and it really interested me. Now, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I just want you to be real and just tell me if I'm full of crap. But I feel like you were talking about this kind of experience, this connection you had between the trauma caused for your baby daughter and the broader family based on the experience of some of the challenges that, our firstborn and your secondborn had with regards to, the reflux and the sleeping and how it was affecting you and your husband and your son and, of course, your daughter. And I'm sure you talked about how it was affecting your family, and it was kind of almost like a PTSD kind of trauma feeling. And I feel like you told me about a conversation you had with medical healthcare professionals who kind of suggested a type of therapy that could help the family. And I'm thinking to myself, what is she talking about? Like, where does she live? What is going on? Could you share that story? Because I just found that one of the most fascinating things that I've ever heard.
Yeah. So, with my first child, we kind of struggled. We bumbled along. We struggled and whatever. And then when my second child came, we had 3 weeks of, look at this beautiful angel baby. She's so precious and beautiful. And then she started screaming and screaming. And we were like, okay, this is not right. This is not right. So, you go there and they're like, well, baby's crying, peaks at 9 weeks. We're like, okay, well, we're 4 weeks in, I guess just 5 weeks to go and then it'll get better, right? And it's like this thing where you're like, okay, what's the next one? 4 months, great, we'll just wait. So we kept on going back to the professionals, and I was kind of like, I had it in my mind that there was something going on with her teeth, because it seemed like, first of all, her mouth was very inflamed, and it seemed like almost like her teeth were coming through extremely early. And so I was like, it's got to be the teeth, because she had constant pain in her mouth. I would put my finger in and she would just like chew on the back of it like over and over and over again, and I'm like, what is going on with her mouth? To the extent where, we kept on telling them, this isn't right, there's too much screaming, there's something wrong. And so we ended up getting referred to a children's dentist and then a dental surgeon. So it got to about 4 months before she was even identified with what the actual problem was, which was silent reflux, which there's an irony in that name. But silent reflux is basically like you're not seeing all this vomiting and whatever, but it's just going like halfway up and then down. And obviously the tube, it's raw, everything's inflamed, which is why her mouth was inflamed, and her gums and everything. She struggled with feeding. She put on weight fine, but like it was awful. And it took 4 months to even get the diagnosis, and by that point me and my husband were a shadow of our former selves. She got put on a different formula, like a thickener or something to help it, but by that point the change in her guts, it was just all too much. So basically she ended up going to hospital, probably more for us than for her, because I think they realized that we couldn't do the job as parents anymore. We were too far gone. And so what they said to us at the hospital, it was the specialist pediatrics department. They wanted to make sure that reflux was definitely the thing, and so that's why they took her in. But I think they wanted to make sure that we didn't like both all just jump out the window or drive our car into the sea or something, because it was like really, it was really, really bad by that point. And then so we got a week of sleep, which I think is like, it shouldn't be normalized that people live with that level of sleep deprivation. But, that's the way that parenting is these days in certain societies. But what they said to us was, we can also try and see about treatment for you guys. And we were like, what do you mean treatment for us? I thought they were going to be like, have you tried CBT? Do you want to talk to someone about this? And they said no. I was like, I don't want to talk to anyone. They said no. By the time we take babies into the hospital at this point, by the time the parents come to us and the babies are this far, we generally treat the parents for trauma. And I was a bit like quite blown away by this. Like, there wasn't anything like, oh, you're autistic, you must be very traumatized. It was just like, if the baby is this bad that gets to hospital, you will have trauma. So
that's astounding, Sam. That's astounding, Sam. Like, people watching this.
I know.
Video, that is an astounding thing to hear, isn't it?
But like,
to hear
it was, but like you wouldn't hear that in, I think, any other country. I think that the Netherlands is extremely progressive in terms of their understanding of trauma and also their ability to treat it. But maybe it was specific to this department, maybe it was specific to that particular psychologist, I don't know. But yeah, if somebody needs to hear this and treat accordingly, it's like, you may not have postnatal depression, you may not have this or that or whatever. Like, have you considered that you may just be traumatized by this whole experience, which when your child has this uncontrollable screaming, it's different if your baby cries a lot and then you're like, oh, eventually there. But if it's something that just you have no control of, you are terrified because your baby is screaming in agony, nobody can help you, that's a really dark place to be. And so, I mean, yeah, this woman probably saved my life, just by saying, yeah, you guys need your trauma taken out of you. So it was the pediatrics department that conducted the EMDR therapy. I actually made a video about my experience because it was extremely weird and atypical, because there was no talking. She said basically, like, we could talk, but do you really want to? You don't need to talk about how you're feeling. You just need to remember it and experience it.
Can you tell me what it stands for?
Yeah, so it's eye movement desensitization I had to look this up so many times when I made the video, and now I've completely forgotten.
You know what? It doesn't matter. I want to know, does it work?
Yes. It works. It works extremely quickly, very effectively. It doesn't work for everyone, but for a lot of people it does. And it's quick, effective, and it's like 2 sessions and you're done. And it's very strange. But the theory behind it is basically you activate the memory, the traumatic memory, the core of the trauma, as it were, and then there is a bilateral stimulation, and that can be done in a variety of ways. So it can be with eye movement, which is where they have basically a light bar, and the light moves from side to side, and you follow it. I also had they have hand vibrators, which is also, so bilateral is just on both sides. So it stimulates one side and the other side. Essentially, it's a massive nervous system reset. And what it also does, I felt like it was kind of redrawing your memory systems. Because trauma, if you think about it, trauma is a memory that you feel like you're still living in the present. So it's really just a misfiled memory, isn't it? So it's a bad memory, but it's stuck as if you are experiencing it all still, rather than looking back on it and thinking, yeah, that was really terrible, but you're not experiencing it. So basically what it does, it moves the core of the trauma, it reprocesses it and puts it into long-term memory, where long-term memory doesn't activate, I say this, I have to look this one up, but I don't believe long-term memory doesn't activate the amygdala in the same way. It doesn't activate these fight or flight, these responses that you get, because it's stored in a completely different part of the brain. So that's kind of like the theory behind it. I'm not an expert, but I've done so many sessions now that I feel like I could be soon. It was happening there and then. I could feel, I went in, and actually she'd been screaming a lot that morning, and I was really, really, really agitated. And like literally it was like, my husband described it like, you know that music video, this is like for the old people in the who are watching, Take On Me by Aha, that video. And there's like all these pencil line drawings, and then there's a little eraser, and it erases the memory. My husband described it as kind of like that video where it's like in your brain, it feels like that memory is being erased and kind of like put somewhere else. So it sounds completely like it's fake and made up, I know.
You know what, though? I mean, for people, like for me, obviously, but for people watching, just the idea that you can connect experiencing parenthood to a trauma, and then there's something that's actually, useful and possible, and it's not medication or anything, I think is groundbreaking for people who could be at the end of their tether. But do you agree that there's this, I don't know, maybe it's society, we're not allowed to say our kids traumatized us just by being babies, are we? Like, it's almost like you're not supposed to say that. I mean, do you know what I mean? Like, I totally agree with you, and it's like, I always try to be real and go, just because I'm autistic and my son's autistic doesn't mean that I can't say that, God help me, it's hard being his dad sometimes. And yeah, my son who's 8, I mean, his voice, I think it's irreversibly damaged from, his early life. I think his voice.
I was also very worried about that. I don't think it's the case with my daughter, but I was really concerned because people just don't understand. People don't understand when they say, like, your baby won't stop crying. They don't understand what that means. They mean literally.
Yeah. Oh man, and the reflux and the crying at the same time. It's just honestly, he's like a baldwin. He's like a baldwin brother. He's like a what? Sad. He's like a Baldwin brother, his voice. But his voice, so it's heartbreaking. And I feel like I'm heartbroken, and I feel like I've cost him his life through a proper voice, and it makes me feel guilty, and that creates trauma. And I think it's more healthy for parents to look at this, this approach from your part of the world and go, wow, okay, this is a different way of looking at things, and it's really beneficial. And do you agree there's probably a lot of mums, a lot of dads that pretending that doesn't happen, when clearly you can parent autistic kids or be an autistic parent and have experiences like this that can actually traumatize you?
Yeah, and I think that like pretending doesn't make anything go away. I've always been pretty straightforward about my mental health in some ways. Like if I'm like, oh, I'm really depressed, I was like, well, I should go see someone about that and go fix that, right? But other people, I don't know. It's not like I grew up in an environment where everyone was like touchy-feely talking about their feelings the whole time. I just don't want to feel like this. So for me, it was always like, well, I need to go fix that. And as a parent, I felt like taking care of myself, that's a responsibility that I have for my kids, it's not just about taking care of them all the time, because like you can't pour from an empty cup, and you definitely can't pour from a cup that's smashed and on fire. It's like I was no good. There were times, and I still feel a lot of guilt about this. I felt like I was no use to either of the kids at some point over the last, well, a year ago or so, and I knew that I couldn't carry on like that. And I felt a lot of guilt. I felt like I was a terrible parent and stuff like that. But that's something that now that the trauma is gone and life has begun to find a new layer of normal, that's now the stuff that I'm kind of going over in therapy, is trying to talk my way through the guilt and all these feelings that I have about what happened. Because when you're in that moment, you can't talk about it. Because if you're still experiencing the trigger, if you're still experiencing things, then I find that it takes a while for me to process things, and I can't process things when I'm being kind of triggered in the first place. And so for EMDR, that was interesting actually, because they did say EMDR is often used for post-traumatic stress of isolated incidents, whatever they might be. But of course, we both had the EMDR and then went back into a situation that was kind of re-triggering us. So it totally helped, and it totally made a really big, clear difference in those first few things. But it wasn't as easy as just like, oh, it's all gone now, everything is great, because then you have to think about, okay, what just happened, and processing everything, and that's still happening for me.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, for me personally, it's a daily thing where I feel like a failure of a husband and I feel like a failure of a father. Like it's very hard to feel like you're doing anything well. We could do a video like listing like the top 10 hacks for parenting, but it's nowhere near as useful as this conversation, because I mean, you might disagree, but Sam, like what you said is profound to me. The idea that you could, a parenting a child could develop a trauma, and this isn't the child's fault in any respect. To develop a trauma based on parenting a child. It's not about the kid, it's about the parenting of it, and feeling like, I've got nothing left, I can't do this, and I don't know how to make them stop screaming and crying, and then it escalates and you catastrophize. And I mean, I'm done. This is the best video ever, and I'm going to let you go. But I just want to finish. I just want to finish this point. Like, do you understand how profound this conversation is? This idea that you can openly say that, own it, and actually heal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty used to talking about my trauma at this point, so it's like no big deal for me. It's the thing is, like, especially for autistic parents, I think that we are even more vulnerable to this feeling of being traumatized by even things that aren't as extreme as my daughter or with your son, but especially if you're not aware of your sensory needs in the same way, and then you're suddenly, it's like I felt a lot like I was trapped, because you have sole responsibility for this child. You can't just leave. You can't go anywhere. You are trapped now. This is your life, and it kind of made me feel like, I don't know how to describe it. Like those dogs that get those electric shocks in that psychology experiment. They shock dogs and then they remove.
And the Pavlov thing where they ring the bell. And
no, not the Pavlov, but when they stop them being able to escape, and then they took the fences down, and then they found that they didn't even try to escape anymore.
They'd lost hope. Yeah.
Exactly, and so I definitely felt really trapped, and that's a horrible feeling, because it's like you love your child, and you want to have a nice life with them. You don't want to be stuck like that, regardless of what anyone thinks about, you can't be traumatized by your own child or something. Well, that's my experience, and I suspect from what you're saying, that's kind of your experience too. And if it's happened to us, then think of how many neurodivergent or other parents that have had experiences about this and have no one to talk to, because well, you wanted to be a parent, didn't you? You know what it was like. And it's like, well, no one does.
And you're right. I can't speak on behalf of your husband, but my wife, who's neurotypical, or she's not autistic, or however you want to say it this week, she was traumatized. Like, probably more than me in a way too. I mean, this affects everyone in a different way. And for us, for me, it was the capacity thing that made it even worse. But so it really is. It's not like we're saying it's all about us. It's actually just a great conversation to just sit back and absorb. I hope people watching this will just do it, just watch it again and absorb it, because I can't even tell you how fascinating I find this conversation and this topic. So I'm so grateful for your time. I really do appreciate it. Thank you for being so open and honest.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I really like to talk about this because it's one of those things that I'm always a bit like, I don't want to do this top 10 parenting hacks, whatever, because it's like, I think that this topic comes out so much better when you have a conversation, and it's not like just it's not an informational thing, it's an experience thing, and you can only really get to the root of that when you have more relaxed conversations, I think. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, I've
saved
loved
me a
it.
job.
It's been great. Thanks, Sam. I really do appreciate it. Hopefully we'll chat again soon.
Yeah.
Now that's a chat you're going to have to watch a couple of times. I think that was an absolutely extraordinary chat, super open and honest, and I hope you appreciated it. I hope it helped you in some way. If it did, make sure you share it with your family and friends. Thank you so much for your support. I really do appreciate it. If you like the videos, hit that subscribe button. Until my next video, thank you so much for watching, and we'll talk soon.